Hello and welcome to Scribes and Songsters. I'm Veronique Mandel. Our guest today is Chatham author Gillian Andrews, and we're going to discuss her novel, A Gift of the Loon. The story is set between 1910 and 1917, and the heroine, Margaret Harrison, encounters a now famous Canadian artist while painting on the French River in central Ontario. Adventure, romance, and betrayal follow as the story explores themes of self-discovery, roles of women, and challenging society's norms in the early 20th century. Welcome to Scribes and Songsters.
Thank you. That was a lovely introduction.
Yeah. Now, first of all, tell us a little bit about Gillian Andrews.
Whoa.
So did you grow up in Chatham?
No, actually, I was born in England.
Oh, you were? Where?
Yes, and I know you spent some time there.
I did, a long time.
I actually have a cousin who lives there who's a nurse, which I know you were at one time. And when I was born in England, we emigrated to Canada when I was 11, back in 1966, a while back. And when I was here, I got married and I worked at the library for a while. And but when my children came along, I wanted to stay home. And that's when I started writing. I just had an idea for a story. And back then, we didn't have computers. They weren't out yet. So I was writing by hand. So you can imagine what that was like when I had to make changes. And then computers came out. And then I had the very painstaking process of learning how to use them. But I'm so glad I did because it's so much easier to make changes and do research, of course, which is really wonderful. So I've been writing on and off since I was in high school, actually. And
had you had anything published in high school?
Oh, no. No, I just wrote little romances for my friends and shared them at sleepovers and that type of thing. And I've always journaled. And, but when I got this idea for a story, I started writing it. And then I started getting Writer's Digest magazine. And then one day I saw this article for a writing course. I mean, there were a lot of writing courses in this book, in this magazine. But there was this one with NRI, and I don't know why, but I got so excited about it. And at the time, we didn't have a lot of money. You know, I was staying home with the children. We just bought a new house. We had 2 children. And my husband said, well, how are we going to pay for it? And so I was willing to take whatever money that I got, and we could pay for it on installments. So my husband chipped in, which I thought was... What a good guy. I know, really. Yeah. And so I took this writing course, and I found out through the feedback that I got that they liked my writing and encouraged me to slow down with the stories. You know, like, for example, when you want to... share something intimate, and then you slow the story down, like step by step by step. And that just creates suspense. Mm-hmm. And then I started writing, and I had my girlfriend's daughter, who I used to babysit, was actually studying literature. So when my first book came out, River of the Stick Wavers, she actually edited it for me.
Oh, how nice.
Yes. And then...
what was it about?
River of the Stick Wavers? It's set in 1963. Actually, Maggie is in that book. That's where I first met her. And River of the Stick Wavers, she is an artist, but she's in her 70s by then. And she's just like a secondary character and a friend to the main character. And so we just meet. But what happened was, my son was very familiar with my books because he does some editing of them as well, which is really helpful because I always have someone to talk to about my books. But he came to me with a picture one day of this young girl. She was standing on a dock with an easel, and she was painting. She was wearing pants, and they were all rolled up. And he said, "This is Maggie." And as soon as I saw the picture, I knew I had to write her story for when she was a young girl. So that's how The Gift of the Loon came about. I wanted to write her story. So taking her back to 19 11 made her 18. And it was just the time when things were really happening in the art world. I thought, oh boy, I can use this. And I loved Tom Thompson. I'd learned a lot about him in the library, and I'd read a lot of books about him.
So what's a stick waver?
A river at the stick waver, actually, it's the native people at the time, like on the river, on the French River, the coureur de bois would come down with the Jesuit priest. And the priest would get out of the canoe and they'd be waving the cross. And so the native people call them stick wavers. And so that's what the French River is. It's the river of the stick wavers. We meet a young woman who just lost her husband prematurely. And she's gone to the French River to grieve. And that's where she meets Maggie, a native woman actually, who help her to find her way because she doesn't know who she is after her husband died. She's trying to reinvent herself.
And so then we come to the Loon. I'd like to sort of talk about the characters in it. You've got some really interesting characters.
Okay.
And of course, Margaret. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting how she was a fully formed person, but then you take us back in this novel to, and we get a real sense of how she grew up. Mm-hmm. And how did you decide the type of characterization to give her, how to make her who she was?
Well, I wanted somebody who was completely different from me. Like in River the Stick Wavers, the main character is very much like myself. In fact, people have said I can hear you when I'm reading that book. But I wanted somebody who was strong-minded. And I started to think, well, who do I know like that? Well, the only person I could really think of was Katharine Hepburn. So very outspoken, always wears pants, and just goes out to get what she wants. And she didn't want to get married either.
Right.
So I just sort of started there and sort of built her as she went along.
Now that you described Katharine Hepburn in that context, I can see Maggie exactly like that. I mean, it's really interesting. So the other character, her parents, they were interesting because the mom seemed to be independent on one hand, but not so much on another.
Yes, I did wonder about that when I started writing it. But my son assured me that even though somebody is a suffragette, doesn't mean they're, free-minded on everything. Mm-hmm. We all have our guidelines that we live by. And during that time period, women got married and they had children. And I mean, she was married. She was married to a doctor and she was a mother and lived at home, but she just had this other part of herself out there. I mean, you would think she would encourage her children. And in some ways, the parents did, as far as encourage them to push their boundaries and to be physical, be really active and things like that. But she drew the line at the fact that, you're a woman, you get married because, when we're gone, there'll be nobody to take care of you unless you're married.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there were little roles for women. It was either you're a widow, you were married, or you're a spinster. That was it.
Yeah.
So she's grim, breaking the boundaries.
And her brother and her sister-in-law. Right.
Jack and Claire. Yes, we didn't see much of them, but they did seem to stand out. Mm-hmm. Yes, Jack was I thought it was interesting, the wife, Claire, that she was a Quaker, and she was against fighting, but she'd married somebody who wanted to go off to war and do the right thing, and who thought he would die. Mm-hmm. I mean, typhus, there were lots of diseases that there were no shots for to protect them or anything, and that he shouldn't have died, but he did. And so, she has to take on a new role.
And, you would think that he would have died being killed, rather than been killed by disease.
Yeah, well, as a doctor, he would have been exposed to a lot of disease, and they wouldn't know that because when the young men went into the war during World War I thought it was going to be over within a few months.
Right.
So, because maybe, and really, they didn't really know anything about what war was like. A lot of young men who went into the forces didn't know what to expect.
No. And her sister Lily, she had an unusual relationship with Lily, didn't she? You know, it seemed as though, even though there was an age gap, there was something about Lily that was very special to Maggie.
Well, I think Lily was the complete opposite of Maggie, but Lily did look up to her as a mentor, I guess. You know, perhaps that's where she's heading, perhaps not, but you know, they were close. I'm trying to think. Yeah, there were only 2 girls too. They got 3 boys, so. You know, I could think it seems natural to have someone to follow around and do things with and figure out how to be with this family of 3 boys who were pretty active.
Yeah. And I love the cook.
Betsy. Yes.
How did you create her character?
Oh, gosh. Yeah, I really don't know. You know, she was just a minor character, so I tend not to spend a lot of time on minor characters.
Yeah.
But sometimes when you're writing, things just come, you know, from out of nowhere. You don't have to go searching for them. So it's a minor character. Betsy seemed like a good name. You know, and when you name somebody, you get an image right away of what they look like. And so, you know, you think of somebody on the stout side, a cook is always tasting the food and that kind of thing, and perhaps short and motherly, because she would have had to take a role on, perhaps along with the mother, perhaps in place of the mother when the mother was busy. So, and she was very down to earth and very practical and very good with advice, very sensible with the advice.
She was definitely a Betsy.
Yeah.
And then there are the Uncle Harry and
Zelda.
And Zelda.
Yes. Again, minor characters. If Maggie was going to live in the city, then she would need people to take care of her, because I don't think her mother would have let her go if there wasn't somebody, and that was the agreement they made. So I wanted somebody who had money, you know, not overly affluent, but relatively so. I've spent some time in Toronto and seen some of the really tall buildings that they have. And so this is the image I was having, but I figured they would still have a couple of people who would help them out around the house and that type of thing.
Yeah.
And, you know, and of course, Zelda was a spy for Augusta.
Yes.
To keep an eye on their daughter. So, yeah, again, a minor character.
And of course, I've left the character that, you know, we're all waiting for, Tom Thompson.
Yes.
Okay, tell me how you decided to bring him into this scenario and to put him together with Maggie. Why choose Tom Thompson?
Well, you know, it's interesting. Whenever I'm writing a book, it seems like I have information that has been there before I even started writing the book. And with Tom Thompson, when I work at the library, I'd work on the front desk and books were coming across the counter. But one day, one of his books came across the counter and I'm just really intrigued, and I'm looking through it. And I'm just like taken aback by these paintings, such an emotional reaction whenever I see them. The vibrant colors, the bold brushstrokes, just very exciting. And so as time went by, I got to see his paintings in Toronto and at the McMichael Gallery. And I did a lot of reading about him, too. And I've done a lot since I decided to add him. But because of the time period, Tom Thompson, like, I could add him to the book. But you know what happened? Which made he became a more prominent character than I expected. I thought maybe they'd just meet and that would be it. But when I first started writing this book, I got 60 pages down and I got stuck. I didn't know what to do. I don't know if you've ever heard of Don Gilmore, but he's an award-winning writer from Toronto. He's written, I'm just trying to think, he's written To the River, which he won an award for. Anyway, I was supposed to go to a writing workshop with him, but my mother was dying and I couldn't go. But I had him as a connection. So I thought, I'm going to get in touch with him, and ask him if he can look at my 20 pages. I was having difficulty, 60 pages, pardon me. I was having difficulty figuring out what can I do with historical fiction and what can't I do. And so I contacted him and he got right back to me and said, oh, I'm free next week. And I thought, oh my God, I know I have to go and talk to him. And so I went up to Toronto and had to manage the subway system, which is really scary for me, but I did it. And I spent the morning with him. And after that, I had no trouble. But it was him who suggested that Maggie, after reading my first completed draft, that Maggie have a love interest. And I was trying to stay away from the romance angle. I just wanted Maggie to be an entity unto herself and save herself, if you will. But when he suggested that, I thought, well, gee, Tom is the most likely person. And so I had to figure that in with where he was and what was happening. I mean, there was actually a Winnie trainer in his life. And apparently, as the story goes, it's not been proven that he actually got Winnie Trainer pregnant and they were to marry. So I wanted to weave that into the story as well. So, and he spent time on Canoe Lake. In fact, the painting on the cover, I believe, was taken at Canoe Lake.
Yeah,
it's painted there.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful painting.
Yes, it is gorgeous. Yeah. I just love it.
So, is there an issue with writing a book that has a character having an affair with Tom Thomson? Did you have to ask the family? Is this okay? Can you have a well-known painter have a fictional an affair with a character?
Well, I believe so. That's one of the freedoms we have when you're writing historical fiction. And I hope I remember to put in that, some of it is real and some of it is not. My biggest concern was a picture, whether or not I could use it, copyright infringement. But I did find out that once you're dead for 100 years, it's no issue. There's nobody to complain about it. And I know when you see a lot of period dramas on TV about famous people, they're doing all kinds of things.
Yes, they are.
So I like to think, yes, it was okay.
Now, speaking of her meeting, on page 70, is where they meet.
Yes, very briefly, yes.
Would you like to read that?
Certainly. Well, war has just broken out in Britain at this time, and Maggie's at the French River. And so the family are talking about the war, and she just has to get away. Since Britain declared war on Germany, it automatically means that Canada is involved. Jack's keen to go and do his part as a doctor. But Claire, being a Quaker, is against it. Your children need you. Your patients need you. I need you, she says. I probably won't be gone that long, Jack says. Then why go at all, she replies. A man has to do what he thinks is right. It doesn't help that my other brothers are clamoring to go as well, adding fuel to the fire. Mother isn't actually against the idea of any of her children going off to war. I'm with her on this one. I can't bear the thought of any of them going and maybe getting killed. I have to get away. Even on the dock, I can hear the family going at it as I slip into my canoe and head across Dry Pine Bay. I get as far away as I can, heading north, and find an ideal spot to pull in. I drag the canoe up out of the water, set up my paint box, and start to work. I am so wrapped up in what I'm doing that I'm not even aware of anything else until a voice calls out from the river. Shore is warm. Startled, I turn around to see two men paddling a Peterborough canoe with quiet expertise over the hidden rocks ever present on the French River. They haul their canoe out of the water next to mine as I watch. It is loaded down with supplies. They must be going quite a ways, I decide. The younger of the two is at least 6 feet tall. I watch as he removes his cap to wipe his sweaty brow with a handkerchief from his pocket. A shock of dark hair falls into his eyes. He fans his fingers through it to hold it in place while he replaces his cap. His worn shirt is rolled up over his sinewy arms, and I can see his equally worn pants have seen better days. His passenger is older, more refined, with a receding hairline and a mustache with wax tips. Not often I see one painting along the river, the younger man says. That's a strange thing to say, considering. I motioned to his art box sitting in the canoe. Ah, my paint box. It's hard to miss. Don't see too many about. You're an artist, among other things. Sometimes fisherman, hunter, woodsman. Where are you heading? Algonquin. I shade my eyes as I look in the direction of Lake Nipissing. That's quite a ways. He shrugs and reaches into his pocket, pulls out a pipe and a pouch of tobacco. He slides the pipe into the pouch to load it and taps it down with an index finger. He then returns the pouch to his pocket, pulls out a match, flicks it on the side of a rock, and lights his pipe. I watch as he puffs a couple of times before blowing out a cloud of aromatic smoke reminiscent of vanilla and spice. I have something of interest in art, the elderly gentleman says as he moves cautiously toward me. May I? He indicates my work in progress with a casual hand. I usually don't like people to see my work until it's completed. Indeed. I understand. Tom is much the same way, aren't you, Tom? Tom responds. Do you mind if I ask you then where you learned to paint, the older man says. I've been painting since I was a child, but lately the Ontario College of Art, whenever I can learn from other artists. Where did you study? I direct the question to the younger man, Tom. He shrugs. Like you, from other artists and from trial and error. At this point, I take him for a weekend hobbyist, not really a serious artist. Oh well. It seems we are taking this poor woman away from her work, the man with the balding pate offers. Perhaps we should be on our way, Tom. Forgive me, I'm not usually so rude, I say. With all the talk of the war, I'm a bit upset. War? The older man says. Haven't you heard? Britain has declared war on Germany. I simply can't bear to think of my brothers going off to fight. The older man pulls himself together. You have more than one? 3. My sister-in-law is beside herself. She's a Quaker, you know, and doesn't believe in killing. But Jack, that's her husband, is all fired up to go and do his duty. And I don't even want to tell you what my mother has to say about all this. She naturally doesn't want to lose her boys. Forgive me, I say. I shouldn't be troubling you with my problems. I came here to get away from all that. Tom stands. Don't worry on our account. We tend to lose touch with what's going on in the world when we're on the river. He turned to the other man. Well, Jim, we best be on our way. We're going to make good time before nightfall. Thank you for your hospitality and the news. Of course, my good man. Jim turns to me then and says, I thank you for the news, as sorry as it is. We'll let you get back to your work. Wait, I don't even know your names. How rude of me. My name's McCallum. Dr. James McCallum. He bows slightly. It's a pleasure to meet you, Dr. McCallum. I'm Margaret Harrison, Maggie to my friends. And this is Tom Thompson. I take Tom's proffered hand. Mr. Thompson, I can't help but notice the strength of his hand, a working man's hand, hard with calluses, and the way those brown eyes look at me from under his lashes. I think I'm a bit of an enigma. I watch them paddle away until they round a bend in the river. I find I can't help feeling like I've missed something. That's our first meeting.
She's really, missed something. Now, do you have the French River? Why did you choose the French River? It's almost a character on its own.
Absolutely. Again, when I was writing my first book, River of the Stick Wavers, the main character came from an obituary from the Globe and Mail. I was fascinated about this elderly woman who would travel out by boat or by herself into her 80s to spend time on an island. And so I started thinking, I need to find an island because I wanted to write about this woman who would do this. And so as it turns out, a very dear friend of mine who's gone now, Helen Tyndall, who if you noticed, I dedicated the book to her. Mm-hmm. She has been affiliated with the French River for many, many years. They have a cottage up there. So I sat down with her one day and we started talking about the French River. And I knew I had to go visit. And I fell in love with the place too. And I've been back a few times. And in fact, I'm going back there this summer. I can hardly wait. But that's how it came about.
And you did a lot of research, but you also you canoe and you do all these things.
That's one of the wonderful things I find about being a writer. I get to meet wonderful people, get to go to amazing places, and because of it, I get exposed to things I've never done before. To me, canoeing is very quintessentially Canadian. Mm-hmm. And I was so excited to actually go there. In fact, when I talked about going to a canoe lake where Tom Thomson painted a lot, my girlfriend said, well, I'll go with you. And she's a canoeer. So we went there and we actually canoed on Canoe Lake, and we went to see the cairn that was erected at Hayhurst Point. And it was very emotional for both of us. You know, we could just really feel his presence there. But since then, I've canoed in Algonquin Park a lot, and I think mostly Algonquin Park and, other smaller hikes, but I come to really enjoy it. And sometimes in Collingwood, I've been hiking in Collingwood, and everything that I've done for my book, I'm still doing. Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah.
And so there's quite a twist in the story. We won't talk about it because we'll let readers experience what happens at the end to Tom and Maggie. Mm-hmm. But before we go, are you working on anything right now?
Oh, gosh, yes. I just finished my third book. It's going to be called The Healing Stones. This one is set at the Lake District in England in a little community that I created called Aldridge. And it's about a woman who, she's married to a vicar, which I think is kind of interesting. And they're trying to have children and they can't. So it's all about that. But there's a bit of a betrayal going on there about how she's feeling about that.
Well, let us know when it's out.
Absolutely.
Us. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it was wonderful. Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. And that's all for this edition of Scribes and Songsters. Many thanks to our wonderful guest, Gillian Andrews. Thanks to our Scribes and Songsters team, producer Brad Sweet and technical producer and editor Gary Glass. Grateful thanks to Tony Toldo and the Toldo Foundation, and to Neil and Tina Queering for their support. Thank you for watching. Hope to see you soon, right back here on Scribes and Songsters. I'm Veronique Mandel. Bye for now.